Have you ever wondered why the teachings of Jesus look so different depending on who you ask? Today, let's dive into one of the most heated and overlooked power struggles in early Christianity. Paul versus Jesus' original disciples and the fierce showdown known as the Circumcision Party conflict. Here's the setup. Paul, the passionate missionary, is in constant tension with the OG disciples of Jesus, especially a faction called the Circumcision Party. These were the followers of James, Jesus' own brother, who took the Torah seriously. For them, being a follower of Jesus didn't mean ditching Jewish law, it meant doubling down. You can actually see this tension boiling over in Galatians 2:12. Paul writes that men came from James and suddenly, Peter, who'd been sharing meals with Gentile converts, stops eating with them. Why? Because James and his crew in Jerusalem were still deeply Jewish, still keeping the law, just as Jesus himself had taught. Jesus even said his mission was only to the lost sheep of Israel, no Gentiles in his target audience. So, when the men from James show up, Peter falls right back in line, showing where the real authority lay. Meanwhile, Paul's doing something totally radical, bringing in Gentiles, breaking away from Torah customs and, according to his critics, bending the original message. Some would call that heresy. And remember, the Jerusalem church led by James wasn't just keeping a few traditions. They were zealous for the law. Acts 21:20 spells it out. James says the original Jesus movement is still fully Torah observant. And if you look at the original Hebrew, the law means the entire Torah, everything in the first 5 books of Moses, not just the 10 Commandments. But Paul, never one to back down, gets spicy in his own letters. In Galatians 2:6-9, he calls James, Peter, and John those who seem to be important. It's a subtle jab. He's undermining the authority of Jesus' closest friends while pushing his own gospel of freedom from the law. And here's a shocker. Paul even calls the commandments the ministry of death, carved in letters on stone in 2 Corinthians 3:7. That's the 10 Commandments. Paul says they're part of a fading covenant. Sure, you'll find folks who say Paul didn't mean to ditch the commandments, but the text is pretty clear. Even Paul admits, I have become all things to all people. So, which Paul do you trust? Not everyone bought what Paul was selling. Groups like the Ebionites, early Christians who kept the Jewish law and rejected Paul's teachings, claimed they followed James and the real disciples, not Paul's visions. Let's keep it real. Paul never walked with Jesus. His gospel came from a vision, not the actual teachings or traditions of Jesus' closest friends. So, this wasn't just a theological debate, it was a fight for the future of Christianity. Paul's letters didn't just reinterpret Jesus, they challenged the authority of those who knew him best. Stay tuned for part 3, where I'll break down how Paul's letters subtly undermine the original disciples and what that means for the real message of Jesus. Don't forget to follow for more deep dives into the hidden side of religious history.